and welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and Jane Velez Mitchell. Smiles, everybody, smiles. This morning, President Obama announced that 2 hostages were killed during a counterterrorism drone strike in Pakistan, including American doctor Warren Weinstein. Mr. Wein.
This morning, I want to express our grief and condolences to the families of 2 hostages. One American, Dr. Warren Weinstein, and an Italian, Giovanni Laporto, who were tragically killed in a U.S. counterterrorism operation.
Dr. Weinstein and Mr. Laporto were on an aid mission in Pakistan prior to being taken hostage by al-Qaeda in 2011 and 2012. The president regrets the mistake.
As president and as commander-in-chief, I take full responsibility for all our counterterrorism operations, including the one that inadvertently took the lives of Warren and Giovanni. I profoundly regret what happened.
Now, last August, our own Rick Unger, with Michael Steele, had the opportunity to speak to Warren Weinstein's wife, Elaine, on their SiriusXM radio show, where it was explained the work he was doing.
He was there doing development work. He was there helping the average Pakistani citizen improve his or her life. That was his job. He was trying to make things better for the ordinary person. He was not there doing anything but that kind of work.
So, Rick, what can you tell us more about Elaine and Warren?
You know, there's such a terrible irony here. When Elaine was on the show, she was so worried about saying something that would play badly with the captors. She was terrified that she could say something that would get her husband killed. Sure. The irony of, turns out we killed him. It's just tragic and horrible. Look, you know, there's not much you can say about this. We're all going to be discussing the value, relative value of using drone attacks in the future. I've heard some say that it wasn't actually necessary, that it could have been a ground raid here. I don't know. You know, all the politics play into it. I actually am a supporter of the drone program. It doesn't get our pilots killed. There are innocent people who do die, but isn't that a part of war, sadly?
I just want to say one thing. This is a terrible tragedy. My heart goes out to the families of those who were killed. But we are talking about this because an American was killed, when there have been so many innocent civilians. Estimates are thousands, including hundreds of children who have died as a result of these drone strikes, and nobody had been talking about it until an American dies. And I think that's sometimes why we have such intense, not to this extent, it doesn't make headlines.
It's only been a couple of hours. So
no, but I mean, over the years, 2,400 at least, innocent civilians have died as a result of drone strikes, according to some estimates. So I think we need to have an independent review, not just of this incident, but of all drone strikes and civilians who've been injured and hurt as a result of them.
I think that Jane may be voting for Rand Paul.
Yeah,
it sounds a lot like the argument that he has made, and it's a valid one, quite frankly, that, you know, what constitutional right do we have to be just, here's the argument that's always vexing to me, that we are completely against torture, and God forbid you waterboard anybody, but kill him with a drone?
Well, right.
Not a problem. No trial, no jury.
The constitutional argument with regard to due process, I mean, when it's an American, and I think one of the al-Qaeda members was an American who had been indicted.
They both were.
But at least one had been indicted. Yeah, so that takes away sort of that due process argument. But listen, this has been discussed. Back in 2012, there was a phenomenal article in Esquire on this whole problem and the lethal presidency and the decisions that our president has to make in assassinating people, because President Ford actually entered an executive order against assassinations. So if you have that, and then in the face of this, which is arguably assassinations, it is a difficult subject.
So how could this mistake happen? Well, joining us via Skype is our friend and former Navy SEAL, Jonathan Gilliam. He, of course, is the founder of U.S. Continued Services. Jonathan, is this just normal collateral damage like we would see in any war?
Well, I don't think it's normal that the hostages get killed, but, you know, intel is not a complete picture. Intel is a puzzle, just like when you do an investigation. It's something that, you know, you may not get a complete 100% of the picture, and if you don't have sources on the ground telling you exactly what there is there, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna miss things. That's war. That's what happens in war.
Jonathan, it's Rick Unger. You know, one of the inconsistencies that kind of came to light today that got my interest, we were hearing that they did, as you say, limited intel. They didn't have any sound intel to go by. They just didn't have anything that would highlight who exactly was in this compound. They just knew it was an Al-Qaeda compound. And yet, they also tell us that the day after they hit it, there started to be all of this telephonic and audio data they were collecting, which is how they found out they killed the 2 hostages. Why all of this telephonic information the day after, but none of it the day before?
Well, that's typical, whether you're doing an investigation or a hit on a terrorist group like that, is that, you know, they may be really low on making phone calls. They may not be using any type of social media, but as soon as something gets attacked, that chatter is going to pick up. Right. It's going to start buzzing, you know. I think one thing, you know, that really needs to be talked about here, though, is if you take the emotion out of this and the sorrow for the victims that were, or the hostages that were killed, I mean, I have a real problem with aid workers, reporters, and these individuals that are going over and putting themselves in a war zone and then being surprised when somebody gets taken hostage and killed. I mean, we need, not only do they need to do a review, you always do a review on whatever type of technology or techniques that you're using in the military, but we really need to start reviewing the policy of these different companies, whether it be an aid group or missionary groups that are going overseas to these very dangerous areas. We need to start looking at that closely and saying, hey, listen, maybe it's on you if you go over there and you get yourself taken hostage, because in this case, you know, it was a drone strike and they got killed, but I know plenty of men who've been killed going in and getting people who had no reason to be in the environment that they were in, no training at all.
Jonathan, let me ask you a quick question. One of the arguments against drone strikes is that it doesn't allow us to capture the enemy and then question them. What do you think about that when you compare the two?
Well, you know, it's a good argument, but the fact is, we need a war plan, a strategic war plan that pushes forward and eliminates this enemy. And just doing drone strikes or just going and capturing one guy, it's only going to solve a little piece of this puzzle that we need to put together. We need to be going in and taking it to the enemy, and we just aren't doing that.
Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your input.
You got it.
Coming up, Senator Marco Rubio takes a big jump in the polls since announcing his candidacy for president. We'll talk about that next. This is the Daily Wrap, live from a very chilly New York City on Newsmax TV.